Ripple and Ripple investor Greg Kidd is discussing facilitating the process for businesses such as Ripple to obtain banking licenses by transferring those licenses straight onto the chain. This might allow Ripple and XRP to reach their full potential. I would want to play this Greg Kidd footage. XRP Las Vegas is the source of this. I then want to discuss certain details on Ripple's actual transformation into a bank. Come on, let's have further news as well. News about XRP is near the conclusion of this article. Throughout this entire process, you will want to stay with me. Let's go. If you are unable to, consult bank. What would happen if we could put the banking sector immediately on chain? That was my decision. I'm assuming you've heard some of the other discussions on tokenized assets today. The issue is that one of the US institutions should place dollars directly on the chain, including the XRP ledger, rather than using a tether or a circle between them. This would indicate that the ledger of records is not a bank core that is 50 years old. Actually, it's the blockchain. This required purchasing a US bank. It was not an easy lift, as you might guess, even though I am a former Federal Reserve employee who worked at Ripple and made some other cryptocurrency investments. However, we were ultimately granted approval last year. It could have helped that I was going to cause a commotion when I ran for Congress. Correct, you mean here in Nevada? We bought Vast Bank, OCC, a nationally chartered Fed holding corporation here in Nevada's 2nd District. Additionally, our sole goal is to shackle the US dollar. This implies that these US dollars are FDIC insured and come with Reggie chargeback safeguards, which means that in the event of a robbery, you will receive your money back. Especially with the new administration's open banking and equitable access, anyone in the world can own those dollars. This implies that almost everyone on the planet has an FDIC insured US dollar deposit account. I'd like to ask you a question then. On the new 5% tax, if you're listed on this ledger and you're sending money home to your mother, you are here on a single visa. If that money stays in the bank, stays in the country and stays a dollar, then it never goes. Is that money being sent back? Not in my opinion. What does it mean to transfer money between countries in this new world if everything is on the ledger, including the XRP ledger, and it's just moving on the ledger? It doesn't actually occur. Everything simply remains on the ledger. And back in 2012, that was made possible by the XRP ledger. I joined Ripple for that same reason. In addition to purchasing a bank and using US dollars, we have also invested in the Bank of London, and I will shortly be concluding a bank transaction in. That implies euros, pounds and dollars operating around the clock with bank funds on the XRP ledger, on the XRP ledger, on the XRP ledger, on the XRP ledger. All right, so if they can pull this off, it will undoubtedly offer Ripple an advantage. In fact, Ripple may obtain a banking license and continue conducting their current business. What other things might that uncover, I wonder? And I looked that up here. And in a moment, I will demonstrate that for you here. Ripple will become a bank after obtaining a banking license. It might look something like this. The image is somewhat cheesy. What, however, might this open up for Ripple, XRP, and $USD if they were to become banks? Let's get started. Direct access to central bank systems and currency infrastructure may become possible if Ripple is granted banking status. In order to manage fiat money and cryptocurrency as a single regulated company, Ripple would need a banking license in order to gain direct access to central bank systems. By doing this, Ripple would become a core provider of financial infrastructure rather than merely a fintech partner. Eliminating the need for middlemen in many transactions and streamlining operations might be really, really fascinating. With a banking charter, they may offer more services. Custody, lending, and stablecoin integration. Ripple might provide regulated custody services for both traditional and digital assets, giving people and organizations a safe haven. The introduction of lending and borrowing services would further integrate Ripple into the global financial system as a trustworthy and compliant link between cash and cryptocurrency. The early SD stablecoin might be further integrated into Ripple's payment and settlement system. We're also discussing global reach and regulatory validity. Ripple would have more regulatory credibility if it were granted banking status, which would facilitate its operations across borders and collaboration with other banks and financial organizations around the world. Although Ripple currently has many money transfer licenses throughout the world, obtaining a banking license would improve its standing and enable it to provide more services. Additionally, we are discussing improved liquidity and usefulness for the RLUSD and XRP. With RLUSD serving as a crucial settlement mechanism, the XRP ledger has the potential to develop into a central liquidity layer for a range of assets, including tokenized assets, real estate, and digital currencies issued by central banks. Real-time low-cost settlement for international payments and forex transactions may be made possible by RLUSD's inclusion into the XRP ecosystem, opening up new applications for both XRP and strategic influence in financial systems, dismantling the barriers of traditional banking. In order to facilitate quicker, less expensive, and more transparent transactions, Ripple aims to rewire the banking system by replacing antiquated infrastructure with blockchain-based rails. The CEO of the firm has outlined the future in which Ripple acts as a bridge between blockchain technology and traditional finance, revolutionizing the global flow of money while discussing market expansion and competitive advantage, as well as the release of trillions of dollars in idle capital. One of the most important things that Ripple might help open internationally is this. Trillions of dollars are locked up in Nostro Vostro accounts around the world, allowing money to flow around the globe and return to the US or other nations. You might use this money for company loans, student loans, or small business loans. This might be applied to housing or auto loans. This might be used in a variety of novel ways to help people develop. The GDP would increase, which may significantly improve the prospects for many people and give the corporate sector more credibility in the future. Additionally, there is a ton of additional information available here. Although we have already discussed a lot of this might undoubtedly aid Ripple. I've already somewhat experienced the advantages of this. Although I don't really need to tell you all this, I'll nonetheless provide this link. This also has some other useful information. I simply don't want to continue to argue about this. Ripple constructed the rails after Versant released this. The foundation is XRP. When utility hits at scale and supply and demand are important, XRP is the compliant way to move wealth across borders and marketplaces. When scarcity becomes a reality, everything else either blends in or disappears. This brings us to the parent firm of Ripple Labs, XRP Ledger, XRP native digital asset advocacy and regulatory engagement, and conventional solutions for CBDCs. You have agreements with financial institutions and liquidity from Ripple Payments on Demand. Additionally, I wanted to look at some additional information that is circulating here. This struck me as a quite intriguing observation. Approximately 1,000 transactions per second can be handled by Swift. As we already know, the Ripple network can support 1,500 users. It can scale to, say, 2,000 or 3,000 TPS per second, based on what I've observed. Additionally, if necessary, the Interledger protocol can scale to millions of transactions per second. Additionally, the Interbank Digital Network already has Ripple. I'll play this now. Could you describe how the XRP community has influenced or perhaps inspired this project? Well, the principles of the XRP ledger form the foundation of everything we do. All the money, level the playing field, and no more walled gardens. Thus, the plumbing is being built by Ripple. In Mexico, Ripple is already connected to the SPAY network, which is the country's interbank digital network. Thus, the plumbing is theirs, merely attempting to be the conduit via which the benefits of the XRP ledger can be accessed by retail consumers. Fascinating. In my opinion, Ripple is interconnected with numerous financial systems. Additionally, you mention a single ledger. There are those who say, oh, it's quant, it's quant, it's quant. When I hear that, it sounds a lot like the XRP ledger, doesn't it? Shopify announces stablecoin payment support. Merchants don't need to do anything in the future unless they want rather accept USDC payments. It appears that USDC will be accessible on Shopify, and it is currently accessible on the Shopify ledger. Able Temenos is probably used by Amazon. Ecosystem for coins that are reliable. Large corporations like Walmart, Amazon, and others are now attempting to enter the market and establish their own stable currencies. We were somewhat aware that this would occur. On this channel, we've been discussing this for years. These announcements are hardly surprising.